welcome to another episode of Behind the Scenes, powered by Just Baseball Media. As always, I'm Jared Perkins. We have another incredible guest here for the Prospects Corner, Hayden Juenger, pitcher with the Toronto Blue Jays, the number 21 overall prospect, sixth-round pick in the 2021 MLB Draft out of Missouri State. Hayden, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Can't complain. How you doing?
Good, good. Excited to have you on, man. Really excited to dive into your journey. We've talked a little bit about some of the mindset tools and things like that you've utilized. So really excited to dive into those. But just for the people who don't know you, give a little background of yourself and how you've made it to your journey in professional baseball.
Yeah, so I am born and raised right outside St. Louis, Missouri, in O'Fallon, Illinois. Kind of grew up playing baseball my whole life. My mom and dad met on a baseball field, ironically. So it's kind of the joke's kind of like destined that I was, destined to play baseball as I got older. But no, it's kind of like my first love. Grew up,
Yeah.
like I said, all I did was wanted to play baseball, and just kind of fell in love with the game at a young age, and just as I got older, it kind of felt like God had gifted me with a talent to play baseball. So between that and my hard work ethic that I strive to have every day, was able to get into college and then eventually into professional baseball. But yeah, it's kind of like I said, I wouldn't say a unique journey, but it's definitely hard work and blessed to be where I'm at.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that journey too, just because I think every player's got their own different path, right, to making it to professional baseball. When was that moment for you when you finally realized, oh, I have a chance to make it to the pros, to make it to Major League Baseball?
I think for me I was, it was my sophomore year of college, freshman year, fall. It wasn't good. Me and my coaches, we kind of joke about when I text them, we joke about it. My freshman fall was not very good, and I just kind of came home and like looked myself in the mirror. Was like, okay, like if this is what you're gonna do, let's do it. So head down every day, started getting to work, and you know, I'd say I had a decent freshman year at Missouri State, and then sophomore year, I noticed the scouts kind of starting to show up more, and
Mm,
um, just kind of took notice of what was happening and kind of like I said, just kept my head down, kept working hard. And um, I think after my sophomore year was when I was like, okay, this is like actually going to happen. In high school, a senior year, they kind of came around, but it wasn't. It was more like kind of like we're going to follow you through college and
yeah.
see. I didn't expect to get drafted out of high school. But like I said, probably sophomore year is when I really was like, okay, I think I can do it. And then, junior year just got out and did what I did. And it was a surreal moment to hear my name called in the draft during July.
Yeah, take us through that draft process. I know, like for guys, I worked at baseball operations at the University of Nevada, Reno, and we had guys who were constantly waiting for that call from scouts to tell them that they were getting picked. What was that moment like when one, like you talked about, how it was just incredible when you heard your name called, but what was the process leading up to the draft and kind of the draft day for you?
Yeah, so process leading up to it, a little backside. I was supposed to go to the Cape Cod League, both sophomore and junior year.
Mm,
Sophomore, COVID canceled, so I didn't end up going. And then
yeah,
junior year, I felt I had a good enough year that I didn't. Not that I didn't need to go, but it was kind. We were on this planet as in like, okay, if I pitched well, it would help me. If I didn't pitch well, could it hurt me? So we decided ultimately just do like the draft day, like draft pro days at the ballpark and
yeah,
all that. So I did a couple of those, but leading up to it, it was very stressful. As especially as we got closer to the draft starting, I could feel myself starting to get a little more nervous each day. And then I remember the day before the draft started, I had a couple of teams call me and was like, "Hey, like this is where you're at. We really like you. We'll see how the draft plays out, but we'll be in touch." And I
yeah,
was like, just going to sleep that night, like couldn't stop thinking, couldn't sleep. You know, I knew I wasn't going to be a day one guy, but
yeah,
I was like, okay, like day two, that's going to happen on day two. And I just remember we had a little like draft party with close family and friends. It turned out to be there was a lot of people there, but like the rounds 3, 4, and 5 go, and I'm seeing guys that I know. I'm like, man, this is awesome. Like, hopefully, just praying that I would, hear my name called. And I remember texting my agent at the end of the fourth round, beginning of the fifth round. I was like, hey, have you heard anything? Like I'm getting. Why am I not? I haven't heard anything. What are we hearing? And I remember him being like, yeah, like the Cardinals and the Braves have reached out, just checking in. And I was like, okay, cool, 5th round starting. And then probably 2 minutes after I set my phone down, I get a call from the Blue Jays. And ultimately, he was like, hey, I think we're going to pick you here in the 6th round. The Braves also, I know the Braves wanted me a lot. So it was
Yeah.
kind of cool, like to have like this two kind of like back and forth going. But ultimately hearing, they never like outright said, hey, we're going to pick you. I remember just sitting there and like looking on the TV, and like I had the draft tracker on my phone, and it actually came through before it was a pick ahead of the TV. And I just remember seeing my name on Twitter, and or on like the notification, and I was like, oh, like this is actually about to happen. Like this is for
Yeah.
real. And then 2 seconds later, the Blue Jays come on, they pick me, and the place goes crazy. It was just a lot of emotions came out, and that really was happy. Like just knowing that the hard work had paid off for me. The tear, like kind of like tears of happiness, hugging my mom, my
Yeah.
dad, my sister. Like it was just it's a day I'll never forget. And like I said, it was really fun to have everybody there with me that day.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome to think about all the hard work that you put in, right, and to finally get that moment. I'm sure there was moments of adversity that kind of popped up for you as you were making your way to professional baseball. For you, when you talk about your freshman year and some of the struggles you had that fall, what were some of the tools that you used to really kind of help you power through that adversity, right? Because when failure comes, a lot of athletes will want to give up and not be able to kind of push through it. So what was one, the things that helped you kind of push through that, and two, were there things that helped you separate yourself from baseball, right? So you weren't wrapped up in your performances. When you did have those moments of failure, you were able to tackle them, but also go home at the end of the night and make sure that you had time to reflect on who you were as a person as well.
Yeah. So I would say, like my freshman year, it was more in the fall.
Yeah.
I remember there were nights where I would just like lay in my dorm room. My roommates weren't there, and I mean, everybody has the thought of, "Am I even good enough to do that? Like, am I over
Yeah.
my head? Is this the place for me? Can I do it?" And I just remember like one day, and this went on for like a week after like fall had ended, and I knew I had my meeting, and I was like, "Okay, that did not go the way I wanted it to go." Um, and then the thoughts start, coming through your head, and I was just like, what do I need to do differently than I've been doing, the last couple weeks? And it wasn't that didn't feel like I wasn't working hard. It was more, I just cleared my head, and I was like, I'm not going to let anything distract me from, being quote unquote the freshman that gets to play a lot.
Yeah.
Like that was my goal. I wanted to come. I went to Missouri State because I felt that was the place. One, God had called me to kind of go to, but also at the same time, like you're gonna play there. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't I'm gonna sit out for a year, and like no, like Coach Gutton was very upfront. Him and Paul Evans were very upfront with me about like you could be a dude on our team right away. And so when I came home I just finished the semester strong and came home, and I remember like I started journaling a little bit, um, just like my thoughts each day, and then I just kind of told myself like you're better than what you showed. Like let's go show them now how good you are. And I think in a sense of that, just kind of like resetting my mind and telling myself you're good enough, and like kind of like that self-positive reinforcement instead
Yeah.
of, I think I mean, I'll be honest with you, jumping the gun back to this past year that we just finished up. I think there was a little bit of, I got caught up sometimes of being like, man, like it's AAA, like I'm young, you know, and you kind of start struggling. You're like, okay, can I even, like, this guy's been in the big leagues for the last 4 or 5 years. Like, you're just as good as they are. You're at the same level. You just have to have that self-confidence in you. I think for me, like the journaling and
Yeah.
just kind of finding, like I said, everybody's different, but finding something to do off the field to stop thinking about baseball.
Yeah.
I picked up golf in 2020. I know it's ironic as a pitcher, like pitchers always golf, but before I never golfed. And once I started golfing, it helped me still be competitive, but not think about baseball.
Yeah.
And for me, like off the field now, I'm a big hunter, and like I like being outside, by sitting by fires and all that. So for me, just like being in the woods or sitting by the fire, listening to music, like that is such a peaceful mindset for me. But obviously, you can't do that when it's in the summer. You're not hunting and whatever. Um, so for me, like those are my kind of resets, and I think those are the tools that have helped me a lot whether it's good, bad, just get away from baseball and try to leave baseball at the field when you leave. Rather, it's I always strive to be, I don't want to let anything that's going on at the field
Hmm.
affect me away from it. Whether you're, for me, like I'm single and I'm not, so like I don't have a girlfriend or a fiance or anything like that. So, but like it's just being a good son to my mom, my dad, and
Yeah.
respecting them and not letting my performance dictate how I act off the field.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I head coach a 16-year-old travel ball team, and like these kids, they'll get in their own heads. Like as soon as they have a bad game, and they're back in the dugout talking about how terrible they are. And
Mm-hmm.
like it's all about that positive reinforcement. Like what you're gonna say about your own self is really what's gonna happen and translate onto the field. So if you think you're not good enough, you're gonna go out there and you're not gonna compete at the level that you're expecting to compete at. So I think how you already having that, even when you hit those struggles, you're probably going to be able to bring yourself back to a good spot.
For sure, and that's like I kind of tell, I help coach. Not I don't know, not I coach, but I train some kids back here, and just being around them when they play fall ball, like I try to tell
Yeah.
them like I wish people told me that when I was their age because I was the same way. I took
Yeah.
15U, 16U very serious, and I was like, it's life or death. Like I have to perform well. My identity is in baseball, and it's like, okay, you're 15, you're 16. Yes, it matters because when you're their age, that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, for
But it's like
sure.
when you get older, it's like, look, like you're gonna fail. It's okay. How to handle like you learn how to handle it. At the end of the day, if you go 4 for 4, 0 for 4 at 15, you're not gonna remember it in 4 years, 5 years. Like heck, you're not gonna remember it next year. Like it's just at the end of the day, like finding that it's okay to not have a great game every now and then. At that age, it's you're not just because you go for 4 doesn't mean you're not going to get recruited or whatever it is that you want it to do. Um, I just think it's looking back on it, I can resonate with those kids a lot because that was me. But I
Yeah.
want to help and mentor them that way. If they can get that, once you get that through your head, it's a little easier to understand.
Yeah, definitely. Now that you've had some success too, right? You got yourself named to the Blue Jays top 30 prospects by MLB Pipeline. What was that moment like too? For one, I know a lot of times individual accolades aren't that big a deal to athletes, but it has to feel somewhat good, right? To be able to acknowledge for the success that you've had. How have you kind of taken that and helped you carry forward just to help the team out?
Yeah, I think the initial like when I found out that I made it last year, I was like, man, that's cool. Like
Yeah.
that was, I wouldn't say it was a goal, but because I try not to look at that stuff because at the end
Yeah.
of the day, I don't want to get wrapped up in that. It's about, yes, it's about yourself and your career, but at the same time, you still want to be a good teammate, you still want to be, a team guy, and you want to help your team win. But I think when I found that, it was like, okay, you know, it's almost like people are taking notice,
Mm,
but in a sense of it's I think with that comes a little bit of added pressure, and because once you start doing it they expect it, and I think as athletes and as players it's the game of baseball is hard in itself, but it's all about how can you be consistent, and I think
yeah.
that's what separates the elite big leaguers and even the big leaguers themselves to a triple A guy or a double A guy. I think there's just as much talent in the minor leagues as there are in the big leagues. It's just the you're more consistent,
Yeah.
and so I think for me it was just like finding that don't put added pressure to yourself just because there's a number by your name versus somebody that doesn't have a number by their name. Because I've seen in my short minor league career, there's guys that are very talented that aren't on those lists. So for me, it's kind of like okay, it's a cool for like good for you, good, you're working hard, but at the same time, it's like don't be satisfied just because you're on that list. Because
Yeah.
ultimately, to me, that list doesn't mean a whole lot. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
that's
think that's
just
huge.
my personality.
Yeah, that's a huge mindset to have too, because there's guys who are never on those lists and they make it to the big leagues, right? And they're super, like you said, they're
Absolutely.
super talented. Everybody looks at the guys who are on the list, but there are tons of guys who are making it who just kind of get overlooked for some odd reason or another. So I think that's a huge perspective to have. For you now that you're transferring into the off season, right? Had the AAA playoffs, I think, recently. What are some of your goals for this off season, kind of moving into 2024?
Yeah, I think for me, it's going to be just getting back to what I did, um, not this past season, the season before that, and that
Yeah.
was just I was more consistent. I had a lot of ups and downs this year, which I'm very grateful for. It's I'd rather that happen and I get to go through that and fail, or not even fail, but just have those challenges in my career that you're going to have. But I learned so much more about myself, about what I could overcome, how to deal with it when it wasn't going good, so to speak. But just kind of like fine tuning my pitches, but getting my body, in a good spot for spring training.
Yeah.
Um, Enjoying the family time that I have. I'm a huge family person, so just being around my mom, my dad, my sister, my great grandparents, my grandparents, just kind of catch up for what I lost in the season
Yeah.
in a sense. But at the same time, like still coming in working out, 4 to 5 days a week and staying after it, because at the end of the day, like when I come into spring training next year, I want to come back ready to go. I felt like this year I wasn't necessarily far behind, like a little behind, but I felt like I could have thrown a little bit more than I did leading into spring training. But I think that's something you learn as a player, especially as a young player. You come in each year and it's different. But I think like ultimately I learned a lot more about myself, like I said, and I can come in and use what I learned in the season, this off season, and for my seasons in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge lesson for everyone, right? That not everybody has that mindset and perspective that you have, where you're like, "Oh, I had a struggles this year. I didn't pitch the way I wanted to. Let me learn from it and find ways to get better." Where most people be like, "All right, well, this sucks. Let me
Right,
feel
right,
bad for
right.
myself and kind of go into a deep dark hole." But it's kind of cool to hear your perspective on how you're taking everything that happened this year, trying to learn from it, trying to figure out where you can kind of hone in on your game to improve it. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I'm blessed that I had bad fall I had at my freshman year at Missouri State, because
Yeah.
I think that gave me like this year it let me reflect to that time, completely different times in my life at completely different levels, but
Mhm.
kind of same similar um, feeling of I was in this kind of dark place, when I let a bad outing or two dictate a month of my season. And as a reliever, if you have a couple of bad outings, your
Yeah.
season is you're fighting for your season. And I think I just let it snowball a little bit. And the good ones don't let them snowball. It's they forget about it. It happened. We're back on the horse the next day, ready to go. And not to say there wasn't great times this year, because I felt like there were times this year I was throwing the ball the best of my career. And I think that just goes to show you how like my season went in terms of where I was at
Yeah.
mentally, like physically. Like I felt like I was in a good spot. You know, the outcome I can come in this year is like my slider was more consistent than it's been in my career this year. And so it's like, okay, that's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
How that felt. We're going to constantly try to improve it. And I think for me coming in and learning that, because I used to be this uh, pitcher and player that how my stats like kind of I let that dictate how I was feeling and
Yeah.
playing. So I think for me that was the big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's awesome to hear kind of in your perspective too. Just going into the last couple of questions, we'll have a couple fun ones and then one serious one. So we've been asking guys kind of what their favorite restaurant is at the affiliate balls. We had the guys in Wisconsin said Culver's was go to right next to the apartment. But for you, did you have a go-to restaurant at affiliate ball when you were there?
Yeah, so on our off days on Monday, I've done this the last 2 years. I'm a huge Texas Roadhouse guy, and like there's
Mm.
one right here where I live in off season, but we had one in New Hampshire at Double A, we had one in Buffalo. So like for me, it's always like my favorite food steak. So I'm all in on going to Texas House. To me, it's a great deal. You get, I think it's like a 8 ounce steak for like $13, and then you solid and you side
Yeah.
rolls. You can't beat it, right? So
No.
me and a couple guys would go there and eat that almost every Monday. Is kind of like a just, hey, we're off, let's go have it as long as we're in town.
I love it. That's awesome. The last question I always ask guys too, just because we want this podcast to be an opportunity for people to get more of the human side of the game, but we also want the younger generation of athletes and baseball players to have an opportunity to come to these podcasts, learn something from guys who've kind of been through it already. So if you had one piece of advice for the next generation of players, what would that be?
I could go on for days about this. I think this is something that's near and dear to me, because I want to pour back into the younger players
Yeah.
as well. But I think, just understanding that, you know it's still a game. You need to have fun. People always told me, like, when you get into college, pro bowl, it becomes a job, and like it's hard sometimes to enjoy it when it's not going well, because at the end of the day, it's your job and you have to perform. But I think when I see younger kids get upset, or you know let their play dictate, like it's still a game. It's a little kid's game. Let's have fun doing
Yeah.
it. And I think if you can, I know that MLB's like motto last year, it was like let the kids play. Like that's
Mm.
literally it. Play it like you were playing it when you were a kid, because ultimately that's when you're going to see the best of the players come out. And I have to remind myself of that, just to have fun and enjoy it, because it's not always there, and how blessed we are to actually get to do this.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. We interviewed Mark Appel, and he said that he felt so much pressure being like the number one overall pick, and he's like, there was this constant like thing just hanging over my head, and he's like, I lost all fun for the game, and that's part of the reason why he left it, was because he just felt like the fun was gone completely of the game that he grew up enjoying and loving for his whole entire life. So I think that's a huge perspective, especially getting at the younger kids at a young age.
For sure. I mean, like I said, I actually talked to Mark um, this past season before he
Yeah.
retired, but I got to talk to him, and just it was cool. Like, it's not, everybody thinks that as athletes we're put on this pedestal and we're these
Yep.
superhuman people. And like, I've talked to Jake a little bit, Jake Berger,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like more of us go through things than what people think. And,
Yeah.
I, as a group, we're coming out about it more, but at the same time, it's like a lot of us, we're all the same, and we all deal with the same stress, we all feel the pressure, and ultimately because we want to perform well and play well for the fans. But at the same time, I think it's important that it doesn't take a toll on your mental health, because at the end of the day, we're still human beings, and we're just like everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I mean, that's why we started the podcast, right? We wanted a space where players could come on, talk about the game in a fun way, but also talk about the things that make them who they are outside of the game more than a baseball player. So just hearing stories like yours, like Jake's, everybody else, I mean, that's why we're doing this. And we can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. It's been fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, we're wishing you nothing but the best, and good luck this offseason and going into next year.
Thank you. I appreciate it.